You know, if you make stuff that people actually do like, whenever they break it, they're going to come back to you to repair it. So today, let's cover some of the least enjoyable aspects of woodworking that I do. Now this particular bowl the lady dropped, and it has a quite obvious crack right here. And unfortunately she did not bring it back to me right off the bat, so that crack has kind of moved a little bit. It's warped. And it's obvious that the impact was about right there, because I have another crack right here that's emanating this way. And once again, because it didn't come back to me right away, can you hear that? It's hitting a little bit of a ledge. So we need to stop those two cracks. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep the surface around all these cracks with a little bit of shellac. Now I'm using a 2-pound cut of Zinsser Seal Coat, and this is basically straight from the can. Just give it a good shake up, coat your rag or towel or whatever you're going to be using, and then along the sides of all your cracks and a little bit ahead of it, just kind of wipe off. You do not want to get any on the broken part, but this is just putting a light coat of shellac around the cracks. Now that only takes a minute or two to dry because it is alcohol based, and that alcohol evaporates pretty quickly. And from there I will grab my furniture wax. Now I kind of like this stuff for no other reason than it has a nice orangey smell to it. Just grab a little of it. I keep it in the refrigerator so it stays nice and hard. And just, you're not going to put a coat on everything, just a little bit on this corner. And what's happening now is the shellac kind of seals the wood against this wax. The wax is going to sit on top of the wood so that any squeeze out of adhesive will hopefully be on top of the wax, so it'll be easier to remove. Now this is a salad bowl, and from the use of it, it looks to me like all they do is serve lettuce and stuff out of it. There's no like pasta or soups that are going into it. So normally I would drill a hole at the end of these cracks, but I know this customer and they wouldn't like that one. So I'm taking a risk here that the crack might continue on a little bit, or it might not fully seal out, so liquids could come through it, but liquids generally make wood swell, so that'll seal it up a little bit. So I'm going to skip drilling the hole because they'll notice it. Now the adhesive I'm going to be using is epoxy, and I normally use T88. It's not quite clear, but that's not really that big a deal here. I will say this, if you're using epoxy because you think it's going to stay clear, stop fooling yourself. Even the clear stuff, it gets scratches on it, it gets kind of cloudy, and if you don't use the really high expensive stuff, it's going to turn yellow, and it's going to look like snot. So you want to add something to the epoxy to darken it. Don't try to match colors or anything like that. Just make it darker, a dark brown. Or what I'm going to do today is I'm going to use some charcoal for my drawing kit, mix it in to make it jet black. And because this stuff takes a couple days for it to fully cure, so you can't really sand it until then, I just went and bought some 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to use that one. It's not going to show that much, but it's better to have a darker line showing the actual crack to show your work, to show you the repair, than something that just looks yucky. Darker is always better. But before you glue it up, put that piece back in there to see how it's going to fit, because I can tell that this one's going to be, you would think that when the piece comes out it's going to go back in there right away because you haven't lost any of it. But because of warpage and stuff, you're going to have to kind of fiddle around with it. And I can see I'm going to have to hold it in a certain spot. So I need to go ahead and grab some gloves, because the gloves will stick a little bit. We'll just have to sand off the remnants. I have a little bit down here. I'm going to have to press down, have to press up right there, hold it. It's just going to be handsy. So we've got our charcoal, we've got our boards prepped, we've got our glue, and we've got our chopstick. So time to mix up a batch of epoxy and get to work. Mix real good. It doesn't take much charcoal to make it pretty dark. Now we're going to be placing it on, we're going to be placing it on the bowl, not the part that came out. I just found that easier. And then we're not using that much. I'm just going to drop a little bit on just the raw wood. You want to get enough on there so that it will spread into the cracks. When you're happy, slide your piece in. And you might have to hold it a little bit to get it in just the right spot. So right now I'm kind of squeezing the bowl together. I'm going to be sitting here for about 5 minutes. Right before it fully sets, I would drizzle just a little bit of CA glue through the joint, through the cracks. And notice I'm doing it from the inside so that it will drain out through the crack and come out the outside. See, it would drizzle through. So it's been about a half hour now, and yeah, as you can see, all filled up. I did say I didn't quite get this bottom section right here aligned properly. You can tell it's kind of a little bit recessed. And cheap epoxy, you know, I can put my fingernail into it right now, so it's still probably curing. But I want to get on with this, so I'm going to use a small curved scraper to scrape off the excess, and then we'll sand it smooth. Now when I'm happy with this area and I've scuffed it up to, I've sanded it up until my highest grit, I will go around and I'll scuff up the entire bowl with that same grit. It just kind of makes it more uniform. Then the last thing is a good old hand sanding, high grit on a foam pad. Gets the grains, the scratch pattern going all in one direction. Now to blend it all together, I'm going to put a very, very light coat of shellac. Now earlier I used a 2-pound, basically straight from the can. I'm going to split this 50-50 mixture to get a 1-pound cut, and that's kind of a wash coat. Some people call it a seal coat. It's just an extremely light coat. And I'm doing that one just because I don't want the streaks. I don't actually want people to notice that it's been shellacked. So just a really, really light coat, working it in circles. It shouldn't raise the grain much. You shouldn't really notice it. But just an extremely light coat. So after the shellac, but before the oil, you can see a slight color variation. And this was what I was talking about, that I've sanded down. This is probably 10% thinner than it is over here. So I've sanded down the darkening, the oxidation of the natural wood. And over time, these will blend together, so all you will have is the black crack coming through here. But it is smooth to the touch on both sides. It's fairly round. It's the best you can do. And they can put it back to use, make it a decorative bowl, or whatever. So now the time, throw some oil on it. Let it sit for about 20 minutes. Wipe it down and give it back to the owner. Even with that crack, it's still a pretty piece of wood. So for today's bonus, I want to talk about one of my favorite tools. One of those tools that any video you see me building some kind of furniture or piece, you've seen me use it. But before we get there, if you've liked this video, please do me a favor. Like, favorite, subscribe, do all those social medias. And if you really want to help us out, visit wortheffort.com. We have lots of ways you can patronize us a little bit more, including an online store where I sell my own woodworking, such as bowls like that. And I have some artistic swag and stuff like that. And I'm working on a sticker series coming out pretty soon. Now, if you've seen any of my hand tool videos, you have seen probably my second most favorite tool, the marking knife. Now, I know I go against conventional wisdom here, but this is my favorite, and it's actually the only marking knife I've been using for probably 5 or 6 years now, pretty much since I bought it. I love the thing. What I like about it, it is a double bevel design, meaning it's completely flat on this side. Now, I know a lot of people prefer something with a bevel on both sides, whether it be something like a chip carving knife, a striking knife, or even something like a small sloyd knife that they can mark off with. They actually prefer having that bevel. I really like having this flat section because whenever I'm marking something, I can use that flat and I can register it against my fence. And it just makes slicing a lot easier. And because it's got the double bevel, I can go both left and right just by flipping it around, flipping the knife around. And I particularly really like this angle. It's fairly upright, so I can get somewhat aggressive if I need to cut really deeply and creates a pretty nice, or I can drop it down really low so it just kind of kisses the top. The other reason why I like the double bevel is because that bevel is there, it tends to want to drift over this way. It wants to equalize pressure on both sides of the bevel, and because this is straight, it actually kind of pushes itself into my fence. So by having a little pressure here and a little pressure here, I keep the straight line. That isn't always the case with me on the double bevel. It will go straight. You can mark all day long with these. I mean, theoretically, me being able to put this right up to my point and then mark it right on that line, right on the edge, isn't that big a deal, because if you make a nick with this knife, you drop it over, it finds that nick. Once you've registered there, that space difference is going to be equalized as long as you keep the handle straight up and down, and you'll mark a straight line. A lot of people like this design because there's no chance of cutting into your fence. But, that's 30 seconds to straighten. I think I've showed you that before for me, so it's no big deal. Another thing I really like about this particular one, look at that thickness of that blade. Most people when they're marking knives like something really, really thin. But I've always found that this is just a lot sturdier and it doesn't flex as much. Can you see that? I can do a lot more with this design. I use these two side points all the time, almost as much as that center point. If I'm cleaning out the sides of a dovetail, I can shove it in there and pivot off of that to really clean stuff out. If I'm doing a blind dovetail where I have to get into a corner, I can actually shove the point into the corner and come across to undercut it and then slice the side with this way. So it just makes doing blind dovetails really easy. A lot of people have to go find a fishtail chisel to do that kind of cut. I mean, because it's thick, I can put lots of pressure on it to do lots of different cuts. I even open boxes with it, but there's no reason why I can't add bevels with it, use it as just a carving knife. I can chip carve with it. I mean, there's so much flexibility to it. I mean, that's why this has been my main striking marking knife since I bought it, and I want to say I bought it like a decade ago. Now, I did go and check. This is a Veritas style. They call it a striking knife nowadays. I don't really know why they call it that, but they make the same exact model. It's got a nicer looking wood nowadays that doesn't have a shiny finish, but it's the same shape. You have flats on both sides, which really makes it easy to register which direction the knife is going. Very nice shape that fits in your hand both that way. I mean, Hey, it's a comfortable knife. Compared to some of the other designs, it just fits me really, really well. So if you're looking for a striking knife or a marking knife, I really do suggest one of those spear point marking knives and get something really, really thick. I like it.